Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Andy Zoll and Anna Wells. We're the editors of manufacturing.net, IN.com, and Design and Development Today, and we each have more than 15 years covering the industry. Every week, we take the 5 biggest stories in manufacturing and discuss the implications they might have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by giving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Andy, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Andy got the late notice to join us today. I'm glad you could make it.
Always a pleasure.
And you were just so pumped from the get-go.
As always, brimming with enthusiasm for any project we have around here, yes.
Yeah, always a pleasure is a statement I would like to take.
I'm trying to work on my sarcasm versus not sarcasm tone. That was not sarcastic. It's actually a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, like, it wasn't sarcastic. I legitimately don't like anything we do here. Anna, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great, thanks.
All right. And Jeff, we miss you. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. All right. Jeff's fine. He's just not here today.
He is coming back.
He'll be back.
As far as we know.
Very soon. Very soon. All right. Now, before we get started, we're going to do things a little bit differently today. We have a word from our sponsor, so we'll see you in 47 seconds.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
All right, and we're back. Let's jump into our first story this week. Stalantis CEO calls out U.S. plants for absenteeism. Stalantis, the company formed when Fiat Chrysler merged with PSA Group, revealed $15.2 billion in earnings in the first year as a combined company. As a result, UAW employees could see the biggest profit-sharing checks in 35 years. Last year's checks were $8,000 before taxes. This year's will reach $14,670. CEO Carlos Tavares called employees, quote, the heart of Stalantis. Is it Stalantis or Stalantis?
I think it's Stalantis.
Okay. The heart of Stalantis. And credited their focus on execution and excellence for the company's record year. He called their commitment tireless. But then he threw a shot at U.S. employees. The CEO said absenteeism in U.S. factories outpaces the rest of the world, saying there was, quote, a significant difference between the U.S. and the rest of the world. The UAW didn't care for the characterization that U.S. workers weren't pulling their weight and defended workers, citing the long hours and pressure it takes to work amid a pandemic. But Anna, wasn't the rest of the world under that pressure?
Right. Yeah. It's you kind of get the impression that the UAW is trying to defend their members, but maybe doesn't quite know how to. I mean, it's maybe they don't know what's causing this issue, potentially. The U.S. workforce has always been renowned for its productivity rates. Yes. So seeing this kind of encouraged me to look at the data behind productivity. And I was kind of surprised to see that output per labor hour in the U.S. has actually been growing at a below average rate since 2005. And this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it says that this represented a dramatic reversal of the above average growth in the late 90s and early 2000s. And that there's lots of potential reasons for this. Much of it is being speculated, I think, by economists. I don't think anyone really has a full picture of why.
It's smartphones, right?
There's a lot of, there was a very comprehensive report that was like, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. But
it's smartphones.
It's TikTok. They said TikTok, and that was all it said was just TikTok. One thing that stood out to me actually was this calculation that looked at decreased productivity in terms of how much leisure time a worker would give up to accommodate it.
Oh.
So in other words, like if output required is fixed, then less productive businesses need to rely on more hours from their workers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically what they said was if productivity had kept pace with what was being achieved pre-2005, then workers would have gained more than 1,000 hours of leisure time per year, which is not really like a real world result, right? It's just, this is only in a lab that we're talking about this, but it does indicate that these workers like probably need to be on site more often than perhaps before. Now let's add in like the labor shortages that everyone's dealing with today and how it's been falling on current workers to sort of bridge the gap where they can't staff. I think maybe this points to like a burnout issue. And I think workers here at Stalantis plants, like obviously there's 43,000 workers that are represented by the union. They're probably better insulated, but it may speak to a larger issue here, I think. And again, like the UAW's response citing the pandemic, I don't think they're necessarily wrong in saying that's a factor, but it's certainly not unique to the U.S., as you mentioned, and something else must be in play here. And they might not know what it is. It could be burnout. It could be, a million tiny things working together. Who knows?
It's the new generation and smartphones.
We've determined that it's smartphones.
Andy, one thing that I noticed is that he came out and said, like, hey, we're measuring all of our employees by the same KPIs, and the U.S. just isn't keeping up. And I thought that was definitely the most direct shot that he took.
I'm curious kind of how, obviously this looks bad for their American workforce, but I'm curious about how it's different, maybe in a positive way for their European workforce, because the UAW is saying this is all contractual time off during a pandemic. So you would think Europe would have the same issues. And if it is contractual, then that's on the company too, because this was all bargained for. They disclose this because they say their labor costs are rising, and that's part of the whole financial picture in their earnings reports. And they didn't really elaborate after it on why that might be in Europe or here, because, well, they picked a fight with their union, and also it took the focus off of their very strong earnings report. So they just kind of left this out there irritatingly for their workers. And then the other thing was they weren't terribly concerned about it because the absenteeism problem is bad at their rivals' American workforces too. So that's just loop the whole U.S. auto workforce in together with that little issue. So that was a nice swipe too.
That's interesting too. And you wonder, Stellantis obviously is a merger with a French company and U.S. company. They have factories all over the world, but they do have a lot in Western Europe. And we know that the people in Europe work typically shorter weeks than in the U.S., which is why burnout was the first thing that came to me as maybe this is one of the variables that could be different.
Yeah.
But again, how do you know? I have no idea.
One of the things that I found interesting was that employees are going to receive up to $900 per 1% of profit margin in North America based on individually compensated hours last year. So that means that employees at plants like the Jeep Cherokee facility in Belvidere, Illinois, which had more downtime because of the microchip shortage, are not going to see as big of bonuses. And so I think that was one of the things that he did when he kind of took a swipe at workers was he really sort of deflected from, we had a banging year and all of our employees are going to be well paid as a result. It seemed like unnecessary damage that he threw on the company. So Stalantis is going to distribute $2.2 billion in bonuses for 2021.
Wow.
That is incredible. Now, UAW employees are also going to get paid at GM, but they're going to see a little bit less, about $10,250, which is still up from last year. Now, Ford seems to be the lowest of the Detroit automakers, is going to pay out $7,377 per employee, which is the smallest, but still double last year's average. So even though absenteeism is bad or worse here, it seems like automakers still managed to persevere.
In the worst year ever when every headline is how tough it is to be an automaker.
They're shutting down their plants and they can't get the parts. Yeah.
You know what? We'll just raise the prices and just have record profit years. How about that?
Right. Get back to basics, literally basics, because they can't put anything beyond standard features in cars.
Man.
All right. Our next most popular story this week, Hershey workers to vote on unionizing a plant described as, quote, prison-like. It's known as the Hershey prison, and they get out for home release. Whew, yikes. Strong words from workers in a video released February 17th by More Perfect Union. In the video, workers at Hershey's production plant in Stewart's Draft, Virginia, describe cruel working conditions, an unfair pay structure, and prison-like environments. The 1,100 workers at the factory will soon vote on whether or not to unionize at the facility, which has been in operation for nearly 40 years. In the video, employees aired their grievances, including working 72 straight days, denying time off requests, and claiming that company agents are monitoring social media posts. They also talked about forced overtime, oppressive management, and pay inequality. Now, the pro-union contingent hopes to join the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, or easily known as the BCTGM, the driving force behind high-profile labor strikes at Kellogg's and Mondelez. Votes will reportedly be tallied on March 24th. Andy, did you have a chance to watch this video that they put out?
No.
It was a spectacular 6 minutes of pro-labor cinema.
I mean, that's always interesting.
Yeah.
The production value is good.
Yeah, values were good. And I mean, it was straight out of Vice. They had to hire the same producers.
Oh,
yeah.
Very good. This, obviously there are problems unique to this facility, but a lot of this reminded me of both the things you mentioned here, the Kellogg's and the Mondelez labor disputes, and other ones that we've seen people complaining about their working conditions. And I mean, it seems to be the same drill in all of these. The food sector has tight margins and rising demand from the pandemic, among other reasons. And the workers justifiably want to work under humane conditions and have a day off once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as we've talked about many, many times across multiple industries, they have the leverage to actually go ahead and try to do that. So this is, it feels very familiar to be talking about this sort of thing in this podcast.
Yeah, and it's, Anna, it's not only familiar, but it is like, I mean, it's not weekly, but we've talked a lot about how workers, this is a good time for workers to kind of flex that muscle and see if they can get themselves a little bit more. And I mean, because the time is right, maybe we're still going to see more of this.
Yeah, and it seems like at some places, like this is really the only option, the article talks about people going on their breaks and just not coming back. That's how it was characterized. And I know that there are people out there looking at this saying, good, if you hate it so much, why don't you just quit? There's tons of opportunities, but it's not always so easy. I mean, if you look at a place so this town is called Stewart's Draft. It's in Virginia, and it has a population of around 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
They have other options in this town. Like there's a McKee Foods plant, there's a Target DC, a couple things. But if you look at median per capita income, it's under $29,000, and that's per 2020 census data. So that's really updated.
Wow.
So they don't pay much, right? The nearest metro area is Richmond. That's like 100 miles away. So it's just sort of this like rural kind of small town triangle. And I think for a lot of these people, it's like you kind of get what you get. It's not so easy to just like hop to new opportunities. And I think some people probably think that they can't walk away because they're making all this money, doing all this mandatory overtime and days without breaks, on and on and on. But unfortunately, that's coming with a significant decline in their quality of life. And that's probably why they're pursuing this union vote. But I don't know. I just think it's easier to say, like, go leave and find something else when you are like, I don't know, like this potentially would require like moving or like a very big commute. I mean, look at the kind of economy we're in right now. Cars are expensive. They're impossible to get. Gas is expensive.
It's harder to find a house or housing.
Yeah, exactly. Rentals are so few and far between these days. You can't buy a house anymore anywhere. It's like it's becoming this impossible choice for these people. So you can see why they're like, what do we do? We maybe can't leave, let's see if we can figure out a way to get a support system in place. So,
I hope that the claims, I mean, it's like a weird scenario. I hope that the claims in the video are exaggerated because like some of the stuff that we saw with the Kellogg's and the long work periods without breaks, stuff like that, working like 72 hours straight. So I hope they are exaggerated because they are in a labor dispute. Because if some of these working conditions are true, it's just sad that they have to be there.
I know. People were saying stuff like, if I can't get my shift covered, I can't take the time off. Like,
yeah, like you can't just flat ask for
time off.
You
Yeah,
have to have time off and it covered.
My favorite was they send you for a mental health evaluation if you take 3.5 days off in a year.
Yeah.
Like,
So that speaks to, so there was a number of claims, like claims that the company is not maintaining and upgrading the equipment, claims of, various cliques and tribalism that operate in a manufacturing. And when you have a big manufacturing facility, you hear about that all the time. But those point systems, man, I've worked with them before and they are the devil. Like, because it is, there's no nuance to it. There's no like, I need to take a day off because my kid is sick. I need to take a day off because I'm sick. I need to take a day off because I'm going crazy. It's just like, you took a day off. It was unscheduled. That is a point. And I thought the same thing too, Andy, like 3.5 points and you have to go for consulting because clearly there must be something off with you mentally if you need to take 3.5 days off.
right.
I guess it's good they have counselling services available.
Sounds
You
like
want to
they
look at the
need 'em,
minimal
yeah.
bright side here.
There you go. There's the bright side. So, but Hershey has spent some $239 million over the last 2 years to expand production capacity and add jobs at this facility. So, they are making investments. Maybe it's just, more space that they can pay workers less to do more. I don't know. But the plant is currently the company's second largest in the U.S. And it's, Hershey obviously believes in the community. Since they've been investing in it, maybe this was an ideal time for workers to try and take a stand. I don't know. All right. Let's move on to our next most popular story this week. Ford beats out Tesla for top EV honor. Consumer Reports recently released its list of the best cars of 2022, and Ford dethroned Tesla as the top EV. Ford's Mustang Mach-E was more reliable, more practical, quieter, and less complicated than the Tesla Model 3. The Mach-E also gained points for a driver assistance system with effective driver monitoring. Consumer Reports said the Model 3 remained, quote, a great choice, but the higher-end Model Y struggled with reliability issues, including paint, hardware, power equipment, and body integrity issues. Andy, your thoughts on this changing of the guard, Ford taking over Tesla?
Changing of the guard.
This car, the Mach-E, when it came out, which I should have looked this up. Whenever it came out, it was months and months ago. Everyone talked at that time like, hey, this car is the real deal. For years and years and years, Tesla was making these cars that just blew anything else electric out of the water. And this was the first one where people were like, hey, this is something that can match up to what they're doing. And this is just kind of confirmation of that, really.
Yeah. Summer 2021.
Okay.
So that's as close as I could get in that moment I had there.
Months and months and months was right.
Months ago. Anna, your thoughts on Ford taking the top spot?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny how Consumer Reports doesn't take any crap from Elon Musk because they I think last year they ranked Tesla pretty well, but I think the year prior they were just like,
Yeah, we don't see it.
Yeah. Exactly. They do not feel like they owe him a thing, I guess. But anyway, I thought that this story was interesting because I was looking into it a little more. And one of the elements that's being blamed for some of Tesla's fall from grace, I guess, here is coming down to a design change that they found to be extremely annoying, the Consumer Reports test drivers. So I know there was a contentious design change in a Tesla. Yeah.
Yeah. What was this design change?
So Reuters said that Consumer Reports really docked Tesla for its new steering wheel, which is a yoke style, you'd see on a race car. Like there's no top to it. It's like arcade style race car driving.
Oh, okay.
And according to the report, the yoke steering wheel installed in the Model S and Model X is so difficult to use that it dropped the most valuable automaker's position in the Consumer Reports annual car brand rankings by 7 spots to 23rd place below average.
My goodness.
I know. So when they call the Mach-E less complicated and more practical, this is the type of thing that they're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like, to me, just these kind of like dumb design choices that like are made to woo gamers and tech geeks, like they're actually difficult to maneuver in the real world, especially according to, so like Jake Fisher, the senior director of automotive testing for Consumer Reports said, quote, "It makes driving these vehicles frustrating all the time."
I mean, that's a design change that anyone that's been driving, I mean, the steering wheel is what, like you have a feel for it, you know, you already like, you have your hand position where it's both on the wheel and, you know, when you got the one on the window.
Yeah.
Like, so that's not something that you can change and not disrupt everyone that's currently on the road.
I know. And like, what happens to the controlled slipping method? It's like it goes out the window.
Well, like,
do we know? No, okay.
No, I don't. Like, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the controlled slipping method is.
It's like when you turn and then you like let the wheel just like slide back through your hands.
No, yeah.
You can't do that.
So that is what I thought it was. I was just like, I didn't know that that's what it was called. I just thought it was
there's some things in here
cool.
from high school that just I don't know. I just think they're like trying too hard. It just seems like sort of a dumb thing. And then here it's like actually impacting their rankings, which people look at, you know?
Oh, yeah. Especially consumer reports. Like, this should be something that can be customized or like interchangeable. Andy, just looking at this steering wheel, this would drive me insane also. Like, when I hear Consumer Reports reviewers were incensed, I automatically think it's a bunch of like curmudgeon-y Jeffs out there just being like, why reinvent the wheel? Literally.
Jeffs out there.
I feel
Jeff
like
would hate this.
my muscle memory of this sort of thing takes me back to those Cruisin' USA arcade games where all I would do personally is just run into the wall over and over again. So I feel like that's what would happen if I was behind the wheel of one of these.
USA.
And you don't want to do that.
No,
you don't want to.
That's an expensive car.
Yeah. No, it's I guess I would have put the steering wheel as more in front in the story because they should be dinged for that.
Well, and maybe they are customizable. I don't know that. Like maybe just this was the version that they got and it really worked out against Tesla and in Ford's favor that they got the yoke steering wheel.
All right. According to our producers, the Mach-E was introduced in November 2019 and then went on sale in December 2020 as the 2021 model. So summer 2021, I was way off.
It's a second model year though.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
But you can't get them. You know, they're all like bought already. So
true. So the other part of this is, you know, we had another Ford story that kind of was really popular this week is that Ford has been contemplating some big changes. Ford CEO Jim Farley is evaluating ways to separate its growing electric vehicle operations from its conventional internal combustion engine vehicles. So, Andy, do you think Ford will spin off its EV business?
They, since that story ran, Jim Farley since come out and said, no, they're not spinning this off into an entirely separate company. And that was speculated all along because everyone thought the Ford family would not go along with it.
Yeah.
And they still wield control over the board and over the shares of the company. So they're going to try, they have to do something, right? Because they're under pressure to shed the costs of their legacy internal combustion stuff and focus on electric vehicles. So they're got to figure out some way to kind of separate them under the same corporate umbrella. And that's going to be tricky to do because there's lots of design and engineering aspects of that. And then there's still going to be saddled with the costs of producing these gas powered cars as they're winding down. So we talk a lot about how it's hard to just start a car company, but once a Tesla or a Rivian is up and running, they don't have those costs to deal with. So it's a whole different ballgame for Ford, and they're going to have to figure something out while navigating their unique corporate structure.
Yeah, it's hard to start a new company, but it's also hard to pivot one that has a legacy like Ford. So Anna, these are, like Andy said, major differences between running a conventional car maker and an EV maker. Everything from design and engineering through manufacturing and marketing. Is the best way to do it to just create a different, like an EV division in Ford and then sort of silo that from the traditional part of the business?
Yeah, I don't know how they do that exactly, in any sort of viable way.
They steal someone high from Tesla, put them in charge, leave them alone.
Give it a really dumb name. Like Ford I don't know. Everything I could think of what the dumb name would be is already someone else's dumb name. So I'll have to think about that.
Something like
we'll workshop
forward. Forward word.
Forward word.
Forward word. Yeah.
Ooh, I really don't like that.
That means it's great.
Yeah, probably.
No, I work for Forward Word.
It's the EV division.
Yeah. So what caused this controversy? Was it investors that were kind of pushing for them to spin out the business?
Yeah, I don't think it was anything sudden. I think it was just kind of gradual pressure from their shareholders to do something about these old costs as they spend billions, like every other automaker, spend billions to try and catch up to Tesla on these electric vehicles and make that the vehicle of choice as we try to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. So I don't know if there's a firm deadline on this sort of thing. It's just something that they're going to have to deal with at some point.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our second most popular story this week. Virgin Hyperloop abandons passenger travel. Virgin Hyperloop might be dead. Sort of. The Hyperloop division was working towards pod-like transportation units to ferry passengers and cargo along a track at amazing speeds. The company's proposed 670 mile-per-hour speeds made it 10 times faster than traditional rail and 3 times faster than high-speed rail. Team Hyperloop recently laid off half of its workforce and reportedly plans to shift to a cargo-focused business model. The Financial Times first reported that Hyperloop was switching gears to the movement of goods, not people. It could still be promising, especially with supply chain problems at ports. Hyperloop wants to create what they're calling inland ports, where containers are shot further inland for processing rather than clogging up congested port areas. Now, Anna, while I'm always saddened to see tube technology for humans take a back seat for a moment, I do like the idea of an inland port.
Yeah, the inland port is a great idea for right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like the greatest need for this technology right now is exactly what Virgin Hyperloop is going to do. I think at some point they maybe had to acknowledge that there's a certain kind of acceptance curve that they were going to confront with consumers, as in how comfortable are people going to be getting into this high-speed train. And, you know, I think like not only just the speeds, but also the pandemic, which really kind of dinged public transit for a while. There are people, you're kind of like locked in this little cube and sharing airspace with people. I don't know when that's going to change, but we're not there yet. March 1, yeah. So I don't know, and if you look at like Hyperloop is basically a super fast high-speed rail. Yeah. And look at where we're at with high-speed rail in America, nowhere, because people just aren't clamoring for that. So if you look at the business case for focusing on the movement of goods instead of people, I think, your safety concerns are a bit reduced. It might improve its speed to market because of that. And its ability to create these inland ports, I think, is exactly the kind of solution we need, because it will clear not only those port side bottlenecks, but it will also reduce the need for over-the-road trucks, for truck drivers, which we don't have. I wonder if the possibility for passenger transit comes back to life someday, and I hope it does, because I think it's valuable, especially considering the ability that this has to be more of a sustainable choice for travel. But for right now, they really have to look at the best way to move this company forward. And they have a unique opportunity right here. And I'm glad to see that they're kind of focusing on that now going forward.
No, I think so. It's we talk about it a lot with some of these electric startups and trying to get that fleet buy. You know, this they can pivot to a way to solve a lot of our current issues and maybe establish an infrastructure too. I mean, if it's going to serve, major metropolitan areas, maybe something like this will help them build the network that eventually can be used for passenger travel. Andy, were you excited to travel in a tube at incredible rates of speed?
I think like a lot of people, I was, as long as a bunch of other people did it first. I'm not willing to be a guinea pig. Let's put it that way, which makes me a hypocrite. I get it. But
yeah. They actually said that one of the troubling signs was like Hyperloop's first guinea pig, the one champion in the business that rode it first, quit. So that wasn't a good sign.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they kind of played it a little close to the vest from what I've read about this decision, other than saying they think there's this opportunity in freight, which I'm sure there is, but also the person who headed the company left. And I think whether that was precipitated by some differences within the company, or if the company took a look after that, there may have been less enthusiasm for trying to get over that hump without that person in charge one way or the other. So that they may have downplayed their concerns with shooting people along a vacuum tube at 600 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen him since he got out of the tube?
I'm sure.
Or he just disappeared into the night?
I don't know. I'll see if he's
Did he resign and get in the tube and fly up into the sunset?
See ya.
He tubed into the sunset. Andy, do you look at Hyperloop type technology and see just a fast train that's enclosed?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
What do you see, David?
Well, I mean, like, no, I mean,
no, I get what you're asking.
Yeah,
we don't have high speed transit in this country.
Yeah.
And other countries do.
So they're trying to make it cool.
And it's a shame.
Yeah.
And you're right. The public hasn't clamored for it with their votes or their advocacy for that sort of thing, because for whatever reason they have bigger fish to fry, what have you.
We don't have that many fish to fry as individuals. Like,
not as individuals, but
as a
I don't
nation,
know,
society.
like, yeah.
We
Well,
have
yes.
so many fish that are currently
Holy
frying.
smokes.
Um,
Got a fish boil.
no, it's just Anna,
Just frying too many fish to vote. Sorry,
Right.
I can't get out there.
right? We're more like frogs in the pot. No, Anna, the reason I say that is because that's like whenever we run Hyperloop stories, that is the one criticism we hear all the time on the site is people say, I don't see why you're calling it a Hyperloop. It's just a fast train.
Well, it's 3 times faster than any high-speed rail.
Mm-hmm.
So it is fast. It would be like the equivalent of taking an airplane. And,
Yeah.
if you think about how annoying the airport is and if you could avoid doing that, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, I don't need to beat a dead horse. I don't think people are ready for it.
Yeah. No, it's this sort of technology has always excited me. And so I'm like, Virgin isn't the only Hyperloop company in town.
Mm-hmm.
There's Hyperloop Transportation Technologies based out of LA and, Elon Musk's Boring Company, which did just have that possible new project in Miami, even though I think the one kind of fizzled out in Vegas, right?
It's going, but they had a little viral dust up where they had a traffic jam in the high speed traffic tunnel, and that's
You don't want that.
not a great visual.
A traffic jam?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That
Not a
is-
great look.
I can
Like
feel the claustrophobia
Yeah.
tightening around.
I'm
me.
having an
like,
anxiety
it's-
dream tonight about
that
this
video.
for sure.
You should watch that video. I think it was in January. That video is something else.
No, thank
Now,
you.
was it okay? It was a traffic jam, and like they were just stuck, or was it like a traffic jam accident?
They were just backed up. There were too many cars, and so there was a backup. But also, it's a tunnel that gives 6 inches of clearance around your car, so you're just kind of looking around like, okay, here we go.
Oh man, is it a traffic jam? How long are you in a traffic jam in a Hyperloop until you're buried alive?
I mean, it takes the denial out of it, because when you're in a traffic jam out here, you're thinking, oh, I'll just change lanes and that'll be the one that goes. And that's never the case. So this just takes that right out of the
You've got
list of possibilities for you. You are stuck.
You have
Well,
nowhere
at
to
least
go.
you can still see like the horizon. I can't imagine like
You can get out of your car and physically walk out. This one, you're just stuck underground.
Yeah, like I'll
forever.
run into a field, I guess. There's just no, if I have to.
All right. Our most popular story this week: explosion rocks huge Louisiana refinery. On Monday, an explosion rocked a huge Louisiana refinery. Marathon Petroleum said 6 workers suffered minor injuries. It was not immediately clear what caused the blast and the fire, which took place in Garyville, which is between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. The 6 injured employees were contract workers. 4 of them were treated at the plants, and then 3 other people were treated and released from a local hospital. So I guess that's 7 then. The facility, which is located along the Mississippi River, has a refining capacity of 578,000 barrels per day, making it one of the largest in the country. Andy, the timing isn't the best for something like this to hit a refinery.
No, I was scolded for taking the only take worth having on this story. So I'll just get that out of the way and we can go from there. It's very good that there were only minor injuries.
Mm-hmm.
No one was killed. And I believe I read that this is the third largest refinery in the U.S. by processing capacity. And we've obviously been dealing with some rising inflation and some conflict that is not low on energy sector implications around the world. So it's not a great time for one of your major refineries to go offline.
Okay. Anna, if that's the only take, do you just want to repeat it?
No, first I want to apologize because I never meant to scold you.
No.
If
I guess I missed this. It must have really, really been hard.
Real dust up, yeah.
Yeah, pretty serious office politics.
How dare you take that take?
Yeah, no, I think there's some other takes. Like the following.
Such as?
No, I was reading about how some of the people living in the area responded to this incident because it sounded very scary.
Oh, yeah.
And very loud.
Mm-hmm.
So one resident of LaPlace, which is a town like 20 miles away from Garyville.
I believe that translates to the place.
By the way, you paused a long time before you said Baton Rouge. Is that because you were not sure?
No, I just,
how to say it?
I was going to say baton, but like, I mean, that's not because I didn't know how to say it. It's because my eyes see that word and I'm just like, oh, Baton Rouge. But it's Baton. I know. No, we're not doing a Capri Sun thing.
No, he caught himself. It's okay.
Yeah, that was just everyone caught me catching myself. And apparently it was a very long pause.
You wanted to say it wrong, but you didn't. So
I never want to say
you're learning. Anyway, so one resident of LaPlace described it as being like the worst thunderstorm of my life. Other neighbors described loud booms and hissing noises, as well as seeing smoke billowing from the plant. So we talk a lot about safety on the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a relief that these contract workers were not hurt. So I think that's why I feel like we can explore this next point. But incidents like this are horrible PR for manufacturers, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Especially when, we're in this time period where everyone needs workers. And manufacturers are dealing with joblessness and labor shortages just like everybody else. But I'd argue here that no matter where an explosion happens at a factory,
Mm-hmm.
it impacts every manufacturer. And that's because these neighbors have imprinted this on their brain. But anytime a story like this makes national news, it kind of rigidifies that preconception that people have about what plant work being dangerous,
dirty and dangerous.
Dirty and dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And that's still a problem. We know that from data year over year over year. That's not a problem that's going away no matter how much automation we add, no matter how clean these factories are, because nobody writes a story about how clean these factories are.
Right.
Right. Or, you just hear about these explosions. And I don't think the average person really maybe makes the distinction between like refineries being a particularly dangerous operation maybe versus wherever else you might work in manufacturing. And I don't even think refineries are that dangerous anymore, honestly. So it's just unfortunately a byproduct of these types of events that they just impact everybody, I think, equally, just to see that this stuff is out there and sort of reaffirms what people believe about manufacturing, even though it's not true.
No, that's part of the entire experience, right? Where they interview the neighbors who had their windows and doors blown out. They talk to people and it's extremely scary. Like it has to also be difficult to live in these neighborhoods sometimes, especially after an event like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is the kind of thing that people think about when a plant project comes up before a committee or people are looking for public input on should we let this factory set up in our neighborhood, and this does not help.
So I was able to see that the fire began with an explosion on the diesel-producing hydrocracker at the refinery. And so a hydrocracker is some sort of equipment that's used to take low-quality, heavy gas oils and turn them into high-quality, clean-burning jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline. So sounds extremely flammable.
It does.
And dangerous. But Andy, what are your thoughts on sort of Anna's, scraped together second take?
Did it sound scraped
together? It didn't sound scraped together.
No, it was good.
Yeah, it was actually great when you're just like, there could be another one. I'm like, oh, where is she going? I'm like, no, that was great. That made sense.
Group projects are hard. That's just it.
Right. So you're gonna take that part.
All right.
I'll figure it out.
Here we go.
Your thoughts on how like safety incidents like this impact the industry at large?
No, because we cover this day to day, we see the distinction between an oil refinery and a plant that makes sheet metal or Fritos or what have you. And I think a lot of other people, they'll just see industrial accidents. So I think that's, and maybe we need to do a better job of distinguishing that these are completely different, not us necessarily, but just, us as a society distinguish. These are very specialized industries, even amongst themselves. And that, a huge refinery like this shouldn't preclude your community from hosting a factory or any other economic development project like it.
And kind of speaking to the fact that there were minor injuries, but nobody had suffered any major injuries. That kind of speaks to the safety protocols that they had in place,
right?
The safety personnel that they had on the ground in order to make sure that something like this didn't get way worse.
Yeah.
All right. Now, we're going to move on to In Case You Missed It. But before we move on to In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our sponsor. Enjoy.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back with In Case You Missed It, stories that weren't as popular on our websites this week, but still stand to make have big implications on the industry going forward. Andy, apparently I have struggled to come back from a break. This was my first one, so it's a real work in progress. What is your In Case You Missed It this week?
I'm not shocked this didn't get a whole lot of traction because it's about a bureaucratic filing by the U.S. Postal Service, which may not, jump right to the front of your brain when you're looking through the newsletter. So what happened here is the USPS is overhauling their delivery fleet for the first time in decades, and there's all these steps they need to go through. They've awarded a contract to Oshkosh Defense, and now they do an environmental review of it, and they publish the decision about the entire environmental review, and it passed, I guess. So now they can go ahead and order the first trucks. The issue here is that you have regulators, the administration, environmental groups, and the actual EPA saying they did a bad job. And the post office said, basically, we don't care. Let me find the quote here. The EPA said its analysis was flawed and that it underestimated the cost of its gasoline trucks, overestimated the cost of the relatively small amount of electric trucks that they're going to buy. And I also wanted to bring this up because, again, it's just kind of a procedural filing. But we covered this before, that these trucks, the gasoline ones, are going to get less than 9 miles per gallon with the air conditioning running. And they met the definition of a heavy-duty truck by 1 pound and 1 pound less, and they likely would have not met federal emission standards and been illegal.
Are they going to be significantly larger than?
Yes.
Okay. Then, I mean, I guess sounds a little bit more justifiable, the 9 miles per gallon, but I'm just thinking of the current little box trucks, and it's like, they should be able to be more efficient.
You would think so, yes.
And you said it's like only 10% of the fleet is going to be electric, right?
Yeah, and the argument they've said all along is that even the gasoline ones can be retrofitted later to make them electric. I don't know that I'd hold my breath for that, but that's been their argument all along when they awarded this contract, and then to this date, even despite all this criticism from the public and private sector.
And all this back and forth about these new vehicles for the post office, I mean, at some point, we just have to get them on the road, right? I mean, what is the current fleet from the 70s, 80s, maybe even earlier?
I think it's the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very old, but then to that point, like, what's another couple of months to like do the review adequately? I think that's what a lot of people are saying. So they got blasted by like the EPA and environmental groups. And my favorite quote, let me see if I can find it. This is from Patricia Portillo of the Natural Resource Defense Council, or NRDC. She said, quote, "Neither rain nor sleet nor financial good sense will stop the leaders of the U.S. Postal Service from trying to buy dirty, polluting delivery trucks."
Jeez.
Whoa. So we can see how, Patricio, not Patricia. We can see how they feel about this decision and this process. So I don't think that this is over. It doesn't feel like it's over. I feel like that more could be done or may be done here in terms of directives. But
you can always file a lawsuit, whether it goes anywhere, but you can always file one.
Yeah, and we love to file lawsuits in this country. So
didn't Oshkosh get sued by the other person that was up for the contract?
Yes, and that Workhorse,
yeah.
but they I believe flirted with bankruptcy after that, so I'm not sure that ended up going anywhere. But there were complaints about how the contract was awarded, and Workhorse, of course, wanted to build basically an all-electric fleet. So that stuck in people's craw too. I think that they awarded the contract to the company that was explicitly not going to make a lot of electric vehicles.
I just can't believe that something related to the Postal Service is not going as planned. It's a real shocker.
Yeah, you rarely see that sort of thing.
Yeah, and a government contract just getting bickered over because of jockeying for position. It is a shock to me. It is a shock.
It's rare.
All right. Anna, do you have bureaucratic red tape in case you missed it?
Well, first, I just want to let you know that I looked up craw, and it is the stomach of a person or animal.
Oh, so when it's... Why did you do that?
Really?
Because Andy said stuck in their craw, and I was like, what is a craw?
That's an expression, right?
It is.
Yeah, okay,
no, it is.
Good.
It's just one that I've never like pursued. So
it's like it's saying it just doesn't sit well.
Yeah.
Which makes sense if it's your stomach.
I
Stuck
think
in
I
your
always
stomach.
assumed it was probably because it rhymes with jaw. I assumed it would like stuck in your...
No.
Oh,
I thought you wanted the jaw thing.
Just
here we
stuck
go.
in an animal's stomach.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories that we've cleared it up though. Craw is an animal's stomach.
Sorry for that diversion. I will get on with
it's good.
it.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah. Anna, what is here in case you missed it?
So among our least read stories of the week,
Oh, it's one that I wrote. Yeah.
just kidding, David. I don't know how poorly it did, but probably poorly.
Oh man, let me look it up. No.
Ball Corporation, the largest aluminum beverage can maker in North America, and also the only one that you know, unless you work in packaging, is raising its minimum order 5-fold, and it's having a profound effect on small breweries. So the company is reportedly increasing its minimum from 200,000 units per SKU to 1 million, which is 5 times the amount. And then they also said that they're going to no longer provide warehouse space. So even if a client can afford the bulk orders, they'll still need to find a place to store them. This looks like it will disproportionately impact smaller craft brewers. And being from Wisconsin, the beer industry is important to us. And there are a zillion craft breweries out there whose presence, in my opinion, makes beer interesting and exciting. You know, like I think boring macro beer companies kind of dominated this market for decades and decades, and now it's just a little bit more interesting in my opinion. But anyway, this industry really faced some difficulties like during the pandemic. So they're facing the same supply issues, the same staff, inflation challenges, all the stuff that the rest of the country is facing, but like shutdowns of restaurants and breweries during the pandemic and, you know, reduced capacities in restaurants, like that hit them particularly hard. Not to mention that competition in this industry is insane. And so you worry that for many of these craft brewers, like it will be kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts and
1 million.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of scenario.
Well, it's, and I mean, more on the 13th most popular story on our website this week. is that you mentioned it's per SKU. And so, I mean, that's like, if they made one beer, they still got to find room for 800,000 more cans.
Yeah.
But I mean, any craft brewery that I can think of has at least 4, 6.
Yeah.
I mean, and think of the craft breweries, even the one that's, you know, in the same building as us. Where is that going?
I know, exactly.
There's no store. I mean, it's really frustrating, but you know, Ball kind of said that their hand was forced, like, in terms of raising aluminum prices. You know, when the craft breweries got together and said, like, it's clear that Ball doesn't want to be in the craft brewery business. Ball's just kind of like, yeah, we try to make it really clear.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been like a peace price game for a while here. We know that at the beginning of the pandemic, they were talking about can shortages. And so it is just Ball Corporation doing what they have to do to be profitable. I get that. It's just that, you know, some of these smaller batch formulas or, you know, it could mean the end of some of these brands altogether if they can't scramble and find a supplier that's going to work for them. And it's not easy to find a supplier of anything that's going to work for you right now.
It used to be that a small the only beer cans that were around were from the huge brewing companies. Every craft brewer was in bottles. And I don't know when the change was made, but now you go into the liquor store or whatever, or the gas station here in Wisconsin, and it's mostly cans for pretty much everybody. And it'll be interesting if they decide to go back to bottles, and then what kind of headache that'll be for their operations.
Well, and to kind of put some perspective, because I mean, you hear 200,000, you hear 1 million cans. It's hard to like, how many is that? Like 200,000 cans filled a semi.
Yeah.
So that's like when they increase it fivefold, like that's 5 truckloads dropping off just pallets of cans. I mean, that is just it's an incredible amount. And I mean, luckily I'm not a beer drinker, so I'm not really impacted here. But if this starts to hit the gin industry, I'm going to be upset.
Yeah, it would be hard when you can't get cans of gin anymore.
I know. I mean, hey, if this even disrupts my occasional mixers, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem.
You can't take glass everywhere, so those cans are important.
Yeah.
True.
Well, and you do wonder too if like some of these craft brewers, if they hit enough roadblocks, like are they more amenable to these little buyouts from these giant companies that are just absorbing everybody, and then it just all gets swallowed up, and then and it sucks.
That is because I mean they're gonna have to look somewhere, at least at a minimum, for storage space. All right. We got some room in the office. We'll have to check with Delta and see if we need to start stacking.
We can figure something out.
Yeah.
All right. My, in case you missed it this week, is a story from Engineering by Design about planes being outfitted with bionic shark skin. On Wednesday, Swiss International Airlines became the first passenger airline in the world to use AeroShark aircraft skin technology. All 12 of the airline's Boeing 777-300ER aircraft will be shark-skinned. AeroShark was created by a team from Lufthansa Technik and BASF. It's a durable, bionic film that mimics shark skin to optimize airflow on the aircraft. The film has a ribbed texture that reduces friction and improves lift when attached to the wings. Now, it's not a huge result. It's only going to make the fleet about 1.1% more fuel efficient. And at that point, I realized I'd already written about 80% of the story, so I was already all in.
So you just went with it, yeah.
Gotta push through.
Had to keep going. But with 1.1%, with just 12 aircraft, it's going to reduce the airline's annual fuel consumption by more than 4,800 metric tons and cut the total annual carbon dioxide emissions of its fleet by up to 15,200 metric tons. So it's going to make a big impact, even if it's only a single percent.
Aerospace is not one of these, it's not like cars where you can just electrify them. Well, cars aren't that easy either. But it's an industry where you're talking about mitigating rather than overhauling it entirely. So any little thing you can do like this, even if it's just more than 1%, that kind of dent, you hope that adds up. And so your industry doesn't make as much of an impact on the environment as it is currently.
Plus, these are applied as like little squares. And I know people are going to start sticking this stuff to their car because it's just like, does your car have a texture? Yeah, it's shark skin. Makes it faster.
No, why not?
Faster, more efficient. Also, in this episode of Engineering by Design, There are 3D printed shoes that are inspired by Bigfoot. And I mean, that's just a story for everybody.
So they found Bigfoot?
Mm-mm. But based on the footprints they have found, they made a shoe. That's not true. No, it's called the Cryptide because Bigfoot and Yeti, they're called cryptids in cryptozoology.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like this gnarly looking, kind of looks like a track shoe that like sprinters use.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath that is like this really cool, like organic looking sole that's been 3D printed. So it would be custom fit to your foot and fit like a sock, but then have like a traditional sole which has like tread, almost looks like a tank tread on the bottom for each individual toe.
Just because you can 3D print it
Is there
doesn't mean you have to.
Is there an estimated cost on these things?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot of dollars.
Yeah, I couldn't find a cost, but I estimated for the sake of the show and said a lot.
Okay. I mean, if you can freak people out who walk past you a few minutes later, I mean, that might be worth it.
Well, you can already 3D print custom orthotics. You know, you stand on the mat, they take the shape of your foot, and they give you a custom 3D printed insert for your shoe. Those are already like pretty expensive, but I mean, it's something that could actually help you not just look cool.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
If it leaves a cool print in the snow, it is worth the investment.
Extra bonus.
Even if it costs as much as a car. All right. Let's move on to our final thoughts this week. Anna, I'd like to start with you. Do you have a final thought?
I do.
Nice.
And since Jeff isn't here this week, I thought I'd pose a question. And this is not trivia. This is just a poll. So today we found a bug in the office, and I'm not going to reveal to you what type of bug. But it did reduce a group of adults to hysteria. So I'm curious to know from our listeners, what is that bug that just reduces you to like a puddle and then you're kind of running around in circles? And we found that today, and we have like the cleanest office. So it was very alarming.
Mm-hmm. Also, the location of the bug was troubling.
The whole thing was troubling.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious if others have a least favorite bug and what it is.
No, it was, around lunchtime. Man, I just got real Wisconsin there, and it was, by the cutlery and the cutting board that I like to use every day. It was on
every
it.
day.
It was on it. And
now that stuff has been lit on fire, so that's what you do.
Gone.
It's
gone. Yeah, no, I didn't.
We need a new office.
Jeff didn't leave us with results of the trivia or a new trivia question, so we're sort of we got to wait until next week.
So we have to invite Jeff back to the podcast for that reason alone.
Gonna need that card, Jeff. No, actually, I don't even remember the question. Andy, what bug gives you the willies?
Failing any other candidates that I'm failing to think of, it's the I believe the species we found here today. I think that's the one. If I find that in my house, I'm just like, nope, gonna go. That room is condemned. I live somewhere else now.
Caution tape. Yep.
And I have pets, so I'm like, why don't you guys take care of it?
Right?
Yeah.
Eat that thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What are we doing
Be
here?
a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is your final thought this week?
I mentioned around the office that we're planning to get out of this lovely upper Midwest spring weather in a few weeks here and go down to Florida for a few days. And one of the things we want to hit down there is the Kennedy Space Center. So I don't know if I'll be filling in before then, but if I fill in after then, I might have a little more sophisticated aerospace take than me and my shark skin take this time around.
I'm jealous of that trip. That sounds super fun.
The commentary is going to be, it's big down there, man. Yeah. Those rockets are no joke. My final thought for this week was that we got a lot of really cool feedback about trade shows that our listeners and viewers like to go to. And we've started to reach out to see if we could do the podcast live from some of these shows. So if there are additional trade shows, particularly in the Midwest, those would be easier. But anywhere, like I know that we're thinking about going to Anaheim in April. So let us know what trade shows you're planning on going to and whether or not you'd be interested in seeing the podcast live. I think that'd be kind of a cool event. The producer Alex is requesting somewhere warm.
So not the Midwest.
Both producers are on board with someplace warm. So I would recommend just somewhere in the Midwest in summer. No. All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use, even a thumbs up on YouTube. You can reach any of us if you want to email the podcast at Andy, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also make sure to subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters and make sure you get the podcast to your inbox first. All right, Jeff, we hope to see you soon. And for Andy and Anna, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.